Well, thank y'all. I just want to appreciate y'all having me. And this is quite a facility here. When I knew I was coming to Alex City, I knew I was coming to a place that I'd been to before, but we haven't fished a Bassmaster event here in probably about all of y'all's age bracket level. The last time I came here was probably 18 to 20 years ago, but I fit in a short time span. I fished like we came here for the Elite Series when Takahiro won. I forgot about that. That was more recent. Y'all might remember that, but I came here for 4 or 5 tournaments back in the day and got to know the lake real well and the area real well, and I loved it. So any of y'all from this area, I do like this area, and I do like the lake. But I wanted to come up here and just kind of go over a few things tonight. We're going to have kind of some common themes on some of the things I want to talk about. A few of the things are just about life in general, talk about my journey to how I'm up here and talking in front of groups of anglers, and then kind of some tips along the way with how to get ahead of competition, whether it's in fishing, in business, or whatever it might be. And then we're going to talk about a few little fishing tips as well. So I'll give you all a few nuggets. If you'll actually remember them, then you might be able to beat the other people at the other tables, if you know what I'm saying. First of all, I'm just going to talk a little bit about my journey and how I got here. First of all, let me see, how many people just love bass fishing in general? Okay, that's good. How many people in this room want to be a professional bass angler? Okay, that's a good number. That's a good percentage. How many people just want to make sure that they work in the fishing industry so they can do something that they love? There's a whole bunch of us. More of those around the back of the room, I would imagine, because that's where I usually sit. But that's good. So I'm in the right room. A lot of people, we're going to share the same passion. So I'll just give you a quick story on kind of how my journey and how I came to get where I am today. So when I was in high school, I played a lot of sports and competed, and I absolutely loved it. I played baseball. I was on the competitive golf team, and I played some basketball. And yeah, that's right. They needed somebody to dribble the ball, so I had to be on the basketball team. But I really loved playing sports and competing. And then when I went to college, I was just kind of done with all the sports and all that structure, and I was trying to feel something for that competitive itch. And I had gotten into some tournaments when I was in high school, but it was really just for fun, just enjoyed some camaraderie and got to go fishing, just an excuse to go fishing. Well, when I got to college, there were no bass fishing teams. It didn't exist. I enrolled in college in the fall of 1996. So that was before all the teams really kind of came to being in the college level. So I just started fishing with a bass club and just got into a great group of guys, started fishing the BFLs, and just started fishing against and with basically grown men and women. That's who I fished against. And I loved it. And it just really got my competitive itch. And you know what everybody asks you. What do they ask you? What do you ask you when you go to high school? What do they ask you? Where are you going to go to college? Right. So when you're in high school, they ask you where you want to go. I put you on the spot there. You weren't even ready. So when you're in high school, they ask you where you're going to go to college. So I had that figured out because I only applied to 2 places, and I only got in one of them. So I knew where I was going to college. So then when I went to college, people ask you what? What do people ask you when you go to college? He doesn't know. Anybody know? What are you going to do when you get out of college? That's exactly what they ask you. So it didn't take long, and I had to start coming up with an answer. And I didn't really have a good answer because there was nothing I really was passionate about at the time other than fishing bass tournaments. So I thought it would be really cool to fish bass tournaments. So I started doing some research and doing some different things to be able to kind of be educated about this decision that I was making, because I had a good relationship with my dad, and my dad was going to ask me what? What are you doing after college, son? So when my dad came to me with this question, I was like, I'm prepared. I have an answer. I'm going to be a professional bass angler, Dad. And he looked right in my face and he said, really? I said, yes, sir. That's what I want to do. And I was prepared. And without him asking another question, I went on for 45 minutes about how I was going to be a professional bass angler. Hey, this is how you do it. You got to do this. You got to work for your sponsors, and you do this, and you got to do these, hit this trail and do that trail. And I just went on and on about how I was going to do it. And at the end, I looked at him, and he looked at me, and he said, "Looks like you've thought this thing out pretty good." I said, "Yeah, I feel like I kind of have." He said, "Well, I guess it's settled. You're going to be a professional bass angler." And I was like, I thought he was joking. I thought he was letting me off easy, right? Because I went to college, and I didn't take college too seriously the first semester. And that first semester, my grade point average was 0 point terrible. And he told me he was not going to help me out anymore unless I turned that around. And my last 2 years of college, I never received anything less than an A or an A plus. So I turned that around pretty quick. I had a I can't remember what my exact GPA was that I graduated college with, but I started with a 1.5 my first semester. Not very good, because I didn't realize it was a little different, a little harder than high school. But my dad liked the way I turned around my college halfway through. He bought in and supported me, in the biggest way, and that was, by believing in me. And so, whether you have people believing in you or not, you have to believe in yourself to what your goals are going to accomplish. And I hope that you can tell that I put a lot of time, even way before I was even to the point to where I was going to start fishing, try to start fishing for a living, that it's a long road. You got to do a lot of planning and try to do the best that you can. So the minute that I graduated college, I was taking my final exam in college, and I had a boat, my little bass boat, behind a truck, and I had it parked right outside the window where I was taking my final exam. And I'll never forget, it was the most distracting I've ever been. And because I kept looking out that window, and I could see that boat and truck out there, and I knew I was going to go straight to the lake and fish a tournament that weekend as soon as I was done, the minute I was done. So I just kept looking out there, and I finished, got another A, got in that truck, and I hit the lake, and I really basically haven't looked back since. But it doesn't come easy. I don't know how many of you guys saw this recent Jacob Fouts video that's been blowing up all over YouTube. Anybody see? Steve saw it. Don't let if you saw it. Wait, see, they're admitting they saw the Fouts video. The Fouts video is very interesting. Jacob's a good guy. He's had a kind of a tough road. He's kind of in a tough spot financially. And my message to him is like, dude, I've been there, man. I get it. So I graduated college in 2000, and I started fishing full-time, and it took me 4 years before any company thought enough of me to pay me a paycheck to represent them. And that's exactly how I looked at it. So I fished for 4 years, basically winning my income through tournament winnings. And it's not easy. I minimized my cost. I did the things that you have to do to be able to kind of make it. And then that next year was a little better. And then that next year was a little better. And I think it was like my 6th year, I was like, okay, it's legitimate. Like I've sustained long enough. This is my 6th year that I've made it. And Fouts is only in his 2nd year, basically, of being full-time. So, he's got a little bit ways to go. I think if he hangs in there a couple more years, he's going to be doing all right, as long as he doesn't step on too many toes along the way with what his videos talk about. Steve knows what I'm talking about because he's laughing over there. And y'all probably do too over here if y'all watched it. But it's an interesting video if y'all want to go see it. Don't ever watch any Randy Blockett videos because they'll discourage you and make you never want to go fishing again. Because I'm up here to tell you, fishing is awesome, fishing is fun, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't accomplish your dreams. And I'll tell you, the best way to accomplish your dreams is to write it out, because then it becomes a goal. And I had different goals that I wanted to accomplish in my career when I started out. One of those goals is I wanted to fish in the Bassmaster Classic. So for the first 4 full years of me fishing full-time, I did not make the Bassmasters Classic. And in that 5th year, I made my first Bassmaster Classic, 2004, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I said, here we go. There is the big stage. I went up there and practiced sun up to sundown for 5 days in the pre-fish period. I thought this is what you have to do. It was just all the hype. That was back when all the boats were still provided for you, and it was the most magnificent show you've ever seen. And I run out there, and my first day, I rolled a donut right across the stage. It sucked. But the next day, I actually brought fish in the stage. And believe it or not, rolling a donut across the stage in Pittsburgh, I was not out of the Classics. You go catch 5 fish and you'd be right back in it. There's a couple guys that actually did that. But I was not one of them. I took some fish in the next day. I remember the experience, and it was one of those just memorable experiences going through that Coliseum and seeing all those fans. It was pretty fantastic. And since then, I've made 13 Bassmaster Classics. I love it. I still love the competition. I still enjoy it, and I still work as hard as I've ever worked in order to make that happen. So that is really kind of like my story, how I got to be at this point. And I'll kind of backstep on how I got to be, because if you're not familiar, I also own Missile Baits, which is a bait company I started 11 years ago. And the Fishing Hole back here, shout out to these guys back here, the Fishing Hole, and Roger with Crusher over there. If you guys hadn't checked out the tackle over there, they've got a good assortment of Missile Baits and Crusher baits back there. They're a local company. If you're not familiar, y'all should be throwing their spinner baits and buzz baits. If you're not, I think it's crazy. But that's back there. I started Missile Baits 11 years ago because I felt like from day one, I told my dad, I told other people that I knew close that the bass fishing was going to open a door business-wise to something for me in the fishing industry that would kind of couple along with doing the tournaments. And so at that point, when I was younger, the only thing I had to look at was like a Jimmy Houston or a Hank Parker or a Roland Martin. And what they did is they took the notoriety that they got from fishing the tournaments, and they started a TV show, and they started to build their brand much beyond what they could do from building their brand just on the tournaments alone. And I was like, okay, now that's an interesting model, but a couple years into it, I was like, I don't want to be a TV host. That's not what I wanted to do. And I really didn't know what that was going to be until about 10 years into being a professional bass angler, and I started designing baits for Spro Corporation. Has anybody caught a fish on a Little John crankbait? That's the first bait that I ever designed for Spro 16 years ago now. And I've designed a whole bunch of baits for them, and I love the design process and then the prototyping process, and then being able to kind of like educate people on how to use the thing and why it's different. I thought that process was awesome. I said, man, I want to do this with soft plastics. So lo and behold, 11 years ago, it'll be January, it'll be 12 years, that I started Missile Baits, and we just continue to grow each year, and we've already sold more this year than we did all of last year, so I think that is a big win in this post-COVID era of the tackle industry. But I love it. And if I can just tell you right now, if I was not up here talking to you as a professional bass angler, I would be working 5 days a week, and I'd be fishing tournaments pretty much every weekend because I love it. Last fall, my schedule worked out to where I could fish a bunch of buddy tournaments back at home, and I had an absolute blast, and I loved it. And then this year, it worked out to where I was not able to fish a single one. I just, between the Missile Bait stuff, my family stuff, and all the other obligations that I have, I'm not able to fish any single one of them this fall. So that just is how it happens sometimes. And I'll tell you that fishing the fun tournaments is a lower priority to me than my business and my family and the other commitments that I have. And so as you go towards your goals, towards your dreams, I'm going to just tell you, if you remember like one thing that I'm talking about up here, make priorities in your life and stick to them. And I think Rick mentioned it. In your life, God is number one, my spouse, my family, number 2 and 3, and my job is number 4. And if you don't lose sight of that, the top relationships will be just fine, and the bottom ones will be very successful because you don't have any confusion on what the top priorities are in your life. I see it a lot with professional anglers. I see it a lot with business people. I see it a lot with people that are really kind of lost in life and they don't know what's going on, is because they don't know and understand what their priorities are. So that's just a little bit of life in general that I was going to be talking about. Told you I'd give you a few of those little nuggets, but that's a few of those. But y'all are probably just waiting for all the good fishing tips that I'm supposed to get up here and wrap with you, right? Does anybody know how to use forward-facing sonar? Does anybody want to get better at forward-facing sonar? I think we all should want to get better with forward-facing sonar. Does anybody hate forward-facing sonar and want to just go back to throwing a spinnerbait on the bank? See, nobody wants to throw a spinnerbait on the bank? Okay, well, maybe during the shad spawn, you better be throwing a spinnerbait on the bank because you'll get waxed by them guys out there in the middle. Uh-oh, did it get cloudy? It was just a passing cloud. We're good. We're good. But yeah, so forward-facing sonar is the new hot topic in bass fishing. There's a big contingent of Randys that want it banned or taken out or whatever. All I can tell you is technology is here to stay. And I think you guys in the younger generation, you guys just don't know any different as far as you're used to technology. You grew up with technology. When you step on this boat, you kind of expect some technology to be involved. And I think that's the future of the sport, is technology is going to be involved. It's going to happen. And it's going to only get better. It's not going to go backwards. Now, can you go get in a John boat with no electronics and go out into a local pond or go in the back of Elkahatchee Creek and go smack some bass? Absolutely you can. If the conditions are right, you can do it. And it's absolutely fun. But from a competitive standpoint, I'm a professional angler. I need to know the latest, greatest, the best techniques to be the most efficient, to be able to catch bass on Lake Martin, Gunnersville, Neely Henry, Lake Lanier, Lake Champlain, Lake Fork, because that's where I'm going to go every year. I'm going all over the country. Steve, Hank, we're going all over the country, and we have to produce and catch bass with 3 days of practice. And from my standpoint, if you don't have that technology to help you break these lakes down and know how to use it, you're going to get absolutely smoked and blistered by the guys that do know how to use it. So if you want to be that professional angler that we're talking about, you're going to have to embrace the technology, but you can't forget about the patterns of the bass and where they're supposed to be and what kind of stuff they're supposed to do. So just I would just say incorporate all of that together, the forward-facing stuff and the new technology, whatever it might be, along with the traditional ways of catching them, whether that's, like I mentioned before, throwing a spinnerbait. If y'all don't know what the shad spawn is, I have run with guys on tour, professional bass anglers that did not understand what the shad spawn was. I am not joking you. They did not know what the shad spawn was. And so I'm going to just tell you, because maybe y'all aren't fully aware what the shad spawn is. So in the springtime, it's right about the time the bass are done or in the middle of spawning. The shad get up there and they'll spawn on rockier areas, and they spawn at night from about 10 to midnight till first light in the morning. They don't spawn as soon as it gets dark. It's got to be dark for a while, and the calmer the water, the better. If you have a whole bunch of rain coming in, shad spawn's usually no good. Or if you have a whole bunch of wind at night for some odd reason, like a front's coming through, shad spawn's usually not any good. They want it nice and slick. They'll be around floating docks, riprap banks, any of that kind of stuff. And if you blast off in the morning, you can absolutely blast the fish on those shad spawn banks. Steve's over there, he knows what I'm talking about. He's fully aware of what the shad spawn could do. Now he won't be throwing a spinnerbait probably. He'll probably be throwing some kind of mag draft or some kind of big swim bait and torching them. But he doesn't give away all his secrets. But a spinnerbait is pretty hard to beat. Chatterbait's pretty good. Swim baits absolutely work during the shad spawn situation. So it's just one of those old school techniques. You can have all the technology you want, but if you don't understand how those fish feed on those shad first thing in the morning on those shad spawn time periods, then you're going to miss it, and you're going to get trounced in these tournaments that you might have. So that's kind of one of my little fishing tips for you guys. But I want to open it up a little bit. You guys I want to open it up to just kind of questions in general that you have. Like, you can ask me anything about my bass boat. I was jumping into this Caracal STS because this is the boat that I'm going to be running this coming year. Last year I had the Puma STS. The last 2 years, I absolutely love it. And I joked with Ed Lochran, who's one of my roommates, the first year that I ran it. At the end of the year, he asked me, he said, "How do you like that Puma STS?" And I said, "Ed, I'm not kidding you. It's the best bass boat I've ever run in my life, hands down. Speed, ride, comfort, dry boxes, like the boat's as good as it is when I got, at the end of the year as it was at the beginning of the year. It handles well. Like, I can't find a flaw with the boat. I love the boat. It's the best bass boat I've ever been in." Well, then last year he had the same Puma STS, and he told me at the end of the year, he said, "Dude, I thought you were joking with me when you said it was the best bass boat. I thought you were just," he's like, "I didn't know how serious to take that when you said it." Well, at the end of the year, he told me, he's like, you really weren't kidding, because it's honestly the best bass boat. He's been running bass boats longer than I've had. He's over 30 years. He's had Skeeters, Rangers, and now Basscats for the last number of years. And he was like, "Yeah, you're right. It's the best bass boat I've ever run." But with the Caracal STS, it's a newer boat. It's really kind of in between the Era and the Puma STS. And I love both of those boats. So I was like, man, take my two favorite Basscats and merge them into one, which is basically what this is. And that's what I'm going to be running next year. And so I'm going to learn it, and I'll be doing plenty of video stuff about it. So if you guys don't follow me on YouTube, you can jump on there. There's a zillion videos from like how to drive a bass boat, jack plates 101, like what exactly is a jack plate and what does it do on a bass boat and how do I use it. So any of that kind of stuff, that basic bass boat information, and I go through all of my boat setups each year, and each year it evolves because the technology evolves and what I really want out of my electronics evolves. So I'll keep updating that. And if you guys have any questions or anything, just always drop them into the comments. I've got all the other social media stuff as well. But again, did you guys have any questions? And there's got to be a question at this table. You guys have been listening very intently, majority of you. How many cookies did y'all eat? All of them? There's like 3 more. Dude, when cookies came out, it got real up in here. That's all I can say. Y'all put a hurting on those cookies. All right, anybody have any questions? Hank, do you have any questions? Oh, there's one over here. Yes, sir.
What do you look for when you're looking to sponsor people with Missile Baits?
So what am I looking for to sponsor people at Missile Baits? So when I own Missile Baits, we have a budget of what we're going to spend on a non-professional angler, and then with the professional anglers. And so with the professional angler side of it, we've had a crazy track record of sponsoring non-professional anglers, and then they turn around and become professional anglers. We did it with Mark Daniels Jr. Before he even fished his first Bassmaster Open. We were associated with Mark Daniels Jr., and then he made it to the elites. And then he got so big time that we couldn't afford to keep him. Gerald Spohr was the same way. Caleb Summerall was the same way. Ed Lochran was the same way. It's funny how many people we've had come through. And now we're Kyle Patrick, who just qualified for the Elite Series. Kyle is one that we've had for the last couple years as he was fishing the Opens, and now he's up onto the Elites. And it is quite a nice young group of anglers coming up to the Elites. But what we look for is where we're going to get a return for our money for that angler. And on the professional level, like we're kind of maxed out because our farm system has been so good that when those guys qualify for the Elite Series, we're gonna honor our agreement, and I don't want them to qualify for the Elites and then have to jump to somebody else. So we keep that really tight. There's a number of really good professional anglers that I'm good friends with that I think would be a great fit for Missile Baits, but we don't have the budget to do it. We're only so big of a company that we can't afford to get everybody under the sun. I mean, Ish takes up most of the budget, I'll be honest with you. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, Ish is a good buddy of mine. He does an awesome job, and he went over to BPT, and now he's fishing the Opens, but he is like the model pro staffer from the pro level to the bottom end, and really what he is really good at is that when he goes into the fishing hole or when he goes into any tackle shop that he's going to, whoever it is he's representing, whether it's Daiwa or whatever line company or with Missile, he'll take pictures of what's on the shelves or what's not on the shelves. He'll get a card of whoever the buyer is, and he'll send that to the proper person at the proper companies that he represents. And then he goes in there and tells the people he's done this for years. He's done this from day one. He talks to my sales director at least once or twice a month. And when he calls, he usually calls with information about a dealer. And then it allows my salesperson to call and make that easy. Hey, Ish was just in there. He told me, oh yeah, he was just asking about you. Like, it makes the company look really good that we're all connected. And so I would just say, communication and making sure you can show yourself of value. We've had some of our, we call them bomb squad guys, some of the non-professional anglers that we sponsor through various means, make it real difficult to not put them on the team because they take a step ahead. They may make some social media posts, they may do some stuff like that, but then they take it the step above and they go to whatever dealers they are and they give us information that's very valuable to us, and they talk positively about the brand. And then, time comes around each year that we're evaluating our bomb squad, and we're like, we got to add Kenny, man. Yeah, I've talked to Kenny 3 or 4 times this year. He's given me a couple dealer leads. We got a nice order out of that one. Like, Kenny's good, man. He's golden. So you show some value to that company will show value to you. Missile Baits is no different than basically anybody else in the fishing industry. Is that good? Well, that's a good question. I mean, I get that asked a fair amount on social media, and I've done a couple of videos kind of talking about that, and it's always a good question. Anybody else before we turn this bad boy over to Hank? Y'all gotta have some kind of questions. Where's y'all's next tournament? Where's your next tournament? Jordan? When is it? December. Mm-hmm. Don't be jerk baiting around them trees, all I'm saying. I heard somebody laugh over there. Just saying. Yeah, go ahead. Do you keep a journal? I had this question asked to me last weekend. I was in a store, and I was talking to a young man. His mom and dad were there, and his dad was saying that you should be journaling everything that you do, so you can always reference it back. And my first couple years on tour, I tried to keep a journal of what was going on, and then I had something like hit me in the head. Is that I feel like that rather than being too analytical about it, you need to fish more from in here than up here. And the reason I say that is we had a good example of that is we had 2 years in a row. I think it was the second week of March. We went to the Harris chain 2 years in a row. I know Steve was there. I think Hank was there too. Went there 2 years in a row. And the first year that we went, myself and Ike and Ellie and one other person, we got on a crankbait bite. We were throwing the Little John on eelgrass on Big Lake Harris. And we were catching like 25 and 30 keepers a day, but we didn't get that big bite that we thought we were going to get. So we ended up getting, finishing in the top 30, both of us, me and Ike both, and we were like, okay, this is great. So I'm thinking, the schedule comes out at the end of the year. I'm thinking, all right, well, we're going back to the Harris chain on the exact same week. In March, the weather's pretty consistent. And we went to Lake Harris. The eelgrass looked exactly the same. And I went out and threw Little John, and I beat the damn paint off the sides of one because I threw it around the eelgrass so much. And I don't think I had a single bite. At the end of that day, I was rooming with Ike and Ellie, and I said, dude, I didn't get a single bite on that Little John deal. And he said, me neither. And we were like, man, what in the world? Like last year, you just couldn't beat them off of the thing, and now you can't even you can't buy a bite on it. And at the end of that first day of practice, I picked up a Fat John, which is like a square bill type bait. Picked up that Fat John, I made one cast like in the last 20 minutes, and I caught a 4-pounder. And I kind of wrote it off as like it was just a late day bite. That was, no big deal. Like that was just kind of a fluke. Because sometimes when you practice from sunup to sundown, you'll get these random bites right as it starts to get dark, and they'll like lead you down the wrong road. So I thought that's kind of what it was. Well, I pursued other bites. I started picking up a plastic worm and flipping and fishing into canals and all this stuff. And I ended up got a check and did okay in the tournament. But the last day, I flipped on Bass Live, watching the fourth day, the guys in the top 10, and I think he was either leading or second after the day 3 was Kevin Van Dam. And I was like, all right, well, let me see what Kevin's doing. So I turned Bass Live on, and he's throwing a square bill on the eelgrass, like not far from where I was throwing it. And like I was so mad at myself because what those fish did is they had, in the Florida fish especially, they get really tuned into a certain specific action or a certain specific vibration. The one year, the exact same week, they were on that Little John type vibration. The next year, they were on a square bill type vibration. And like 2 or 3 of the other guys in the top 10 were throwing square bills, not flat sides. They were throwing square bills. So my history on that body of water really kind of messed me up because I was just so sure it was going to be exactly like it was the year before. There was really no conditions change. The fish just wanted a different vibration. So that's my long story short of being a little too dialed in on being very, very specific and keeping journals because it can burn you. Like if I tell so many people, like you might have this perfect scenario to where the 3rd week of April, the last pocket in the back of this creek over here was just loaded. So you're like, okay, the next year rolls around, that same week, the weather's about the same, everything's the same. You're like, I'm going to go blast them in the back of this pocket. You go back there and you don't get a bite. Well, the year before, there was bait pushed up in there for some reason. And so the fish were just loaded in there. Then the next year, that bait's not in there and there's not a fish to be found. But you're going in there and you're going to beat the paint off of all the rocks because you want to make sure that you know those fish are in there because you caught them the year before in that same week. Everything is the same. So I just caution about keeping too tight of journals and just let it be from your gut and let it be from you go in there and you're like, nope, just doesn't feel right. You're going to change up. Maybe you change baits or you change areas or change locations. Maybe you go a little bit deeper. Maybe you go a little bit shallower. You just fish the conditions for that particular day, and I think you'll have a lot more success on the water long term than if you take too many journals. I'd say the same thing about getting information. Getting information absolutely burns you because it's hard to fish history. So now you're fishing somebody else's history, which is like interpretive history, which is even harder to do. To me, it's like if somebody says, hey, black and blue jigs are really good on this lake. Like, sweet, that's all I need to know. Thanks. Like, it gives me a place to start. Or it might, say, everybody fishes something with a lot of red in it here for whatever reason they like it. Maybe the crawfish are red. Cool, thank you. That's information that's good to me. That's what I need to know. Not like that brush pile is where you need to fish and fish the whole tournament. That can really burn you, that specific type stuff. Good deal. Any other questions? Any other question? I know we got to have some in here. All right, we want to roll. We want to get Hank up here. We could get Hank for his segment, and then we'll maybe do a joint question answer when everybody is ready to actually ask some questions. You can't tell me a room full of fishermen don't want to ask another fisherman a question. That's why I left some time here to be able to do this. Do you have one? Have one over here? Okay, yes, sir.
How much time do you spend getting ready for your tournament in your downtime? So I know everybody thinks you just go fishing and then go home.
Yeah, I mean, so when the Elite Series rolls around, we're traveling to an event. When I get my new boat, like there's a whole section of time to prepare the boat to be ready to go and get it tested and all that kind of stuff. But as far as tackle preparation goes for each particular Elite event, I'm a prepper. I like to prepare and then prepare for what happens if that doesn't work, which is usually the case. I would say it's at a minimum 8 to 16 hours, kind of depending on the tournament. It's just as far as just tackle prep time. And I tell people when I prepare for each tournament, it's like that kid that goes in the bathroom and has to pull his pants all the way down to go to the bathroom. I have to take all of my rods out of the rod locker and set them out, and so I can see everything that I have. And that people that take one rod out at a time and redo it and then put it back in, I don't know how they could keep track of what they've got and what they don't have. But I got to take them all out, lay them all out, and then I can see. I got all my flipping sticks here, all my spinning rods here, all my chatterbait, spinnerbait, topwater rods right here, and then I can make sure that I've got everything covered and everything prepared, and then I'll turn around and put them all right back in. Even if I don't even change anything, I'm taking every single one of them out so I can see everything that I've got, and then I put it all back in. But yeah, that's it. It is quite a bit of prep time. And just I know from fishing the local tournaments, I wouldn't spend as much time. The first couple I didn't spend, but maybe an hour or so. But that changed after the first tournament. I did okay, but it was like, man, I was tying on leaders during the tournament and digging for stuff that I didn't have in my buddy's boat. So that next time I ended up, just for a one-day tournament, I was doing 3 or 4 hours of prep just for that one-day tournament. And then me and my buddy, we did pretty well on the other ones. We did okay in that first one, but the other ones we were more prepared, I can tell you that much.
Sponsorship commitments, I mean, so you have some appearances to make, or what you...
Yeah, I mean, as far this is a full-time job. When I'm not on the road at tournaments or speaking engagements, I'm in the office every day at Missile Baits or some kind of family obligation at home. And so what is funny to some of my employees is that it comes springtime, we'll have a tournament that's going to be in April, and I'll have to do my tackle for that tournament 3 weeks prior to the tournament, because I'm not going to have a chance to prepare my tackle for 3 weeks. And so sometimes you have to do the best you can at kind of gauging what the setups are going to be and exactly what you're going to need. So that's just all time management. So if you're going to juggle a bunch of stuff and like school and fishing and all, you better be good at time management. It'll teach you time management. That's good. Yes, sir.
So I know you're familiar with most bodies of water now, but before you were familiar with them, how did you do research on them with water depth, water temperatures?
So going to new bodies of water, kind of how do you break down new bodies of water? So I'll tell you something. When I was a teenager, I went and I watched the Bass. It wasn't called the Bass University back then because Bassmaster actually did it, but they had a lot of the top pros came around. And I remember a seminar when I was younger and a teenager, George Cochran gave. And George Cochran made it real simple. He's a very simple fisherman. And he said, so yeah, basically he had this question. He said, when I go to a lake, a normal lake, like Lake Martin, it's a normal type lake. If it's in the springtime, I'm fishing the lower half of the lake. If it's the fall or early winter, I'll fish the very upper end. He's like, that's just a good place to start. Now there's always exceptions to the rules, of course, but that's just typically in the springtime, the fish move to the bank to spawn, and in the lower ends of the lake, they typically stay further off the bank the rest of the year. But when they're spawning, they're more susceptible, so you're going to have more fish go to the bank. He also said when the water was high, he goes to the lower end of the lake, and when the lake is low, he goes to the upper end of the lake. So it's just a couple general rules to kind of consider. But when I first started going to lakes like Toledo Bend, which is a massive, massive body of water, I would just draw lines and I would say I'm fishing from here to here. And I've still never been more than like a mile north of the Pendleton Bridge, which the Pendleton Bridge is like a little bit below halfway on that lake. I have not even fished, and I've fished it like 10 times, and I've only fished the bottom half of the lake. I've never even been up to the upper end of the lake. I don't even know what it looks like. So just pick a section of the lake that you think fits the time of year, and then just learn that. Don't try to learn the whole lake. Just try to pick apart one piece of the puzzle and then try to figure it out there. I think especially if you're not getting like 3, 4, 5 days of practice, just picking an area and then trying to figure it out is usually the best way to go. And it's hard to go with like other people's information, like, hey, you need to make sure you go to the back of Waxahachie Creek, or you need to make sure you go to the mouth of Blue Creek and fish. Sometimes that can just lead you in a wrong direction, to where you're just trying to fish somebody else's fish, rather than you go to the mouth of Blue Creek and you're like, well, I think this looks like crap, and then you go a little further and you're like, this looks okay, and then you go to the back of it and then all you see is this bait fish action. You're like, man, this looks good. It looks like fish are back here. Lo and behold, you start catching them. You're doing the conditions, not just going off what somebody else tells you. Does that make sense? Cool. See, now you're getting some questions here. I'm sorry? What? So I like a buzzbait around any type of water about this deep or shallower. So the buzzbait is really good, in my opinion, around any kind of like shallow brush, shallow flat type banks. If it's going to be any deeper than that, I'm usually picking up a whopper plopper or some other chopo, whatever type of plopping type bait. There's 4 or 5 decent ones out there now, but a plopper style bait, that's anything deeper than that. I think the plopper has a little better drawing power, but if it's in that real shallow stuff, then that's where I'm throwing the buzz bait. Or you got a little bit of brush mixed in, that's where that buzz bait seems to be key. I heard I listened to Brian Thrift give a seminar. He thought that the buzz bait was better in lower light conditions, and then the plopper was better in higher light conditions. And I almost have to agree with that. I think that's a pretty good way to put it as well. Like when it's real low light, buzz bait might be better. And then once the sun starts to get up, the plopper bite can be just as good, if not better. That's a good one. That's a tougher one. But that's what I'm here for. Wait, we have one over here for a quick. Come back to you. How do I what? I can't hear you. How would I locate the fish? The electronics are a big help, but where do you start? I think the easiest way to kind of think about it is, if you can find the buffet, like you find the bait fish, you'll find the fish, as far as you'll being in the right area. And you can find the bait fish visually by seeing the shad on the surface, or you can use your electronics in the back as you idle around, or you're forward facing as you look around. Do you see bait fish in that area? That's going to be where that's going to work. You can visually see them on your electronics, or you might see birds working. That could be a good way to kind of find you. Like if you see birds working in an area, bait is going to be in that area. There's going to be fish in that general area. And then you get to fish to be able to figure out what depth range they're at. And some of the electronics now can help you. If you look at your electronics and you see all the bait fishes in the 0 to 10 feet of water, that's probably where the bass are going to be. If you look on your electronics and you see bait fishes in 20 to 30, that's probably where the bass are going to be. That makes sense. And then the other thing to think about too, don't skip over, is that like once the spawn goes by, bass spawn goes by, if you come up to the boat ramp and you look down the bank and all you see is brim going down that bank, there will be bass on the bank somewhere. There will be bass on the bank somewhere, and that's where that buzz bait, plopper bite comes in, chatterbait bite, shallow, any of those topwater that I mentioned, shaky head around brim beds. There will be a population of bass that are going to be shallow if you see brim all around the bank. Just keep that in mind as well. When all this forward-facing stuff's going on, there are always still some on the bank. With the brim are up there, the bass will be up there eating them. You had a question?
That's on free fishing, okay, before. A lot of stories, we went on Friday, free fishing, don't both those fish. What about those Saturday tournament, catch any?
Somebody caught the fish, apparently. Or somebody caught the fish, or the fish moved. Did you see any U-Haul trucks? The fish might have moved all their stuff and gone somewhere else. You know, I always say the fish have fins and will use them against you. So they will have them and they will swim right off. In my opinion, a lot of times what happens is that something happens with the barometric pressure, the wind changes, the conditions change, and then whatever they were feeding on in that area, whether it was shad, blueback herring, brim, they moved or they left. That's typically why if you go to an area and you catch a whole bunch and then you go back and you don't catch any, the buffet moved somewhere. Sometimes the buffet might move to where they're uncatchable, they're out in the middle. It might move to the next point. All you gotta do is move out of a pocket and go to the next point, and all of a sudden you're like, darn, I just caught 3 off this one point. We didn't even fish that yesterday, or we fished it and we didn't catch any. And they moved. They're usually in that area somewhere. So, but if you go back and go in there and catch them, and I'll tell you, I'd say the biggest trap that tournament anglers get into is trying to recreate history. And if you go out there and you flip over there next to that pole and you catch a 4-pounder, and then you go down to that pole and you catch a 3-pounder, when you come back into that pocket and you throw by that pole and you don't get a bite, you're automatically like, oh crap, something's changed. And then you're like, man, if I throw by this pole where I caught this 3-pounder on and I don't catch one, and you flip over there and you're like, man, on the first cast I threw last time and he bit, and then all of a sudden you're trying to recreate what you did the day before. So what I started doing was that I started doing half of my tournament days on technically new water, so that I tried to keep up, but I didn't have any history that I was trying to recreate. So let's say I pulled into a pocket that's the size of this room, I flipped over to one pole, caught a 4-pounder, flipped over to the other pole, caught a 4-pounder. I may not hit this other side of the pocket. I got 2 bites on this side, I'm not hitting that side. So then I would go to the other side and start and work my way around to where I got bit. Because all of a sudden, I'm fishing just whatever's in front of me, and I'm gonna fish shallow, I'm gonna fish a little, well, I didn't get a bit up there, and let me throw out there in this deeper stump I saw on the side scan, and you pitch out there in 8 foot of water, and all of a sudden you catch one. And then you start fishing shallow again, all of a sudden, instead of going up there and pitching at that pole that's, maybe in 2 foot of water, you're like, well, maybe I can find another stump out here, oh, there's another one in 8 foot of water, it's out here. Boom, then you're fishing the conditions. You're not trying to recreate history from the day before, or the week before, or the year before. Does that make sense? With us fishing a lot of new bodies of water, it's a little bit easier to fish new water, but if you kind of keep that in your mind as of like saving stuff for the tournament, like I'm gonna save that, like if I get bit on this side, I'm gonna save that side, or you pull up to a stretch of docks and you get bit on the first one, the next 2 look the same, you're like, all right, I'm not even gonna fish those. I'm gonna just leave those for tomorrow, and I'm gonna go to this other side of this other pocket and see if I get bit in there. And all of a sudden, if you find one area that you get a couple bites in, and you don't get any bites in the other area, those other 2 docks are probably going to be similar, and then you can fish them, with like no history, and you can. Does that make sense? Kind of a blank slate. You can figure out the conditions that day. Like one day they might be on the walkways in practice, and then the next day they're down under the deeper parts of it, on the outside poles. I've seen that before. All right, question?
I know this kind of goes along with what you just explained, but what concludes to you that you should leave a spot there for a tournament that,
When do you go and when do you stay? Yeah, that's always a tough one, man. I think it depends on how many fish you have in a cage somewhere else. It depends on how many fish your areas you think are just as good or better that you might have. If you found 10 schools of fish and you fish one for 5 minutes and you don't get a bite, you just go to the next one. But if you fished all the day before and you didn't get a darn bite until you came to this one point and you got 2 bites on it, you might want to just slow down and give it a chance, Or if you fish it for 20 or 30 minutes, you maybe go somewhere else and then come back and fish it again. Just because, you don't have a lot of other stuff to fish, right? So it really kind of depends on the situation. I've seen where time of day is a big deal. I've seen where fishing deep early is the only time you get bit, which is like backwards of what you would think. And I've seen times where you're not going to get bit shallow until the sun comes up, especially around the brim bed stuff. You're not going to get bit, and so it's almost opposite of what you'd think. And so a lot of times I've started out shallow and not got a darn bite, and then go deep in the afternoon and only caught a few. And then I talked to Steve Kennedy, and he does exactly the opposite of what I did. And he's like, I smashed him in the morning deep, and then I went shallow and caught 2 big ones in the afternoon. Like, oh, son of a. So just, it's hard to say about when to stay and when to go, because there's no one right answer. You just have to, that's why I say don't be too analytical about it, just use your gut. Like if you think that place sucks and it's done, just go. Just go, don't second guess it, just go. But if you're like, man, I know they're here. If you're like in your gut, you're like, I know they're here. Just keep changing baits. Keep moving around. Maybe they went in the back of that pocket next to it. Maybe they moved out a little bit deeper. Maybe they went up shallow on that point. On those big long points, man, I've seen that happen, where those fish they move way shallow. And you're fishing in that 8 to 15 feet of water, and they're not there. They're up there in 4 to 6. All of a sudden, and I've had co-anglers show me that stuff, because you're fishing out here, and then all of a sudden they bomb one up there in no man's land, and they catch one. You're like, wait the hell, hold up a second. You throw up there, and all of a sudden you're hooked up with one. You're like, darn, all these fish moved up. And it doesn't make any sense. But, they can't read. They don't know the books that we do, like that book. Any other questions? The favorite what? I didn't hear you, sorry. Oh, favorite boat snack? I love a lot of snacks on the boat. I've eaten in the tens of thousands of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. I'll just tell you that much right now. I've eaten more than a hobo has, I promise you. They're good. I love them. I still love them to this day. I'll grill them at home because they're so good. But that's always good. Most people don't eat enough when they're on the boat. So being hydrated is a big thing, especially in summertime tournaments. When you hydrate, you don't drink the Gatorade once you get on the water and start sweating because it's too late. You drink the Gatorade the night before. You drink the Gatorade the day before, the night before, and then you drink water and a Gatorade during the day. You got to hydrate before you get out there, not while you're out there. It doesn't work like that. So eating and being hydrated is big, because the hydration, your cognitive skills get off if you're dehydrated. So you want to flip that jig under that dock from that last 30 minutes of the day, it's not going to happen if you're dehydrated, or it's not going to happen very easily. A couple more questions and we'll switch it over to Hank. Sound good? We got one. Let's do one more. I thought you were going to ask me a question. Your nose itched. Your beard itched. Look at these high school. You in high school? Full-grown beard. Look at that. Unbelievable. What are they feeding these kids these days? Apparently pizza and cookies. I spoke to a group of high schoolers a couple years ago. They came to Missile Bates' office. It was a local one. And I'm not kidding you right now. This kid had the biggest, thickest beard I've seen on any man. Any man. I'm talking like out to here. And this kid was in high school. I didn't believe that he was in high school. I made him pull his ID out, and he was 16 years old. I could not believe it. I was like, dude, when did you start growing this thing? When you were 12? And he was like, I'm already 13. I couldn't believe it. It's pretty wild. All right, you want to get Hank up here? All right, well, I appreciate everybody's time, and I appreciate the questions. Thank you.